All right, welcome back to part 2 of the Analyzing Poetry notes. We're going to go ahead and pick up where we left off. Where we left off with diction. A poem's diction provides a direct link to the speaker's attitude and, in turn, some of the poem's bigger ideas. As you consider diction, try to locate the words with strong connotations and think about how these added layers affect the poem's meaning. So again, talking about like multiple meanings of words, for example, or, maybe two words are similar, but they chose this word as opposed to another. Think about why. Why choose the words that are on the page? And again, with poetry, I would argue that word choice is even more strategic than in a novel. There aren't, hundreds of other words or thousands of other words to drown these out. Now, if you're not sure how to find the diction that gives the poem its depth and power, look for word choices that appeal to one or more of your five senses. Naturally, anything that sticks out to you as a reader when you read something should be given more attention, right? Because these are the things that you're naturally drawn to, and more likely than not, there'll be some sort of sensory diction or something, some specific word choice that brings that out. So it's a good starting point when you're analyzing the author's word choice. Now, we need to talk about shifts. When we think about the speaker's attitude toward the subject of a poem, it can also be helpful to look at the shifts, which indicate some kind of change, often in the speaker's perspective. You might see a shift in verb tense, a shift from past to present, a shift in tone, or maybe even a shift in speaker or point of view. So think about literally like working shifts, right? You have first shift, second shift, third shift. First shift people work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Second shift people work from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Third shift people 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then it repeats, right? These are transitions, a change from the status quo to something different. They're present in poems a lot. I think more common ones would be a shift in tone or a shift in even not necessarily speaker point of view, but attitude, I guess would be what I'm looking for here. So as you read, look for any transition. Where is something different than it was in the rest of the poem? Or where do you see like a subtle move towards something different? Tone and mood. You are familiar with tone and mood again, but in relation to poetry, the speaker's attitude towards the subject of a poem is expressed by the poem's tone and mood. Tone provides the emotional coloring of a work and is a direct reflection of the speaker's attitude. Diction is often the primary contributor to a poem's tone, but all the writer's style choices affect it. So, what is the speaker's attitude? This is reflected in tone. The mood is the feeling the reader experiences as a result of the tone. If you are unsure how to read the poem's tone, its mood, the way you feel about it, will help point you in the right direction. So if you are reading a poem and it makes you laugh, then it's probable that the tone is lighthearted, right? If you're reading a poem and it makes you feel sad, well, then your tone is most likely melancholy or serious, right? So you can use this feeling as you read to help decipher the speaker's attitude. One thing I will throw in here, poetry is meant to be read aloud. So reading poems aloud can give you a completely different effect than reading them in your head. And I really encourage you to read them aloud, or at least to whisper them to yourselves at a bare minimum to get the feel of the poem. Step 3, reading for detail. You must show how the poem's meaning is created using the poet's language, style, and structure choices as evidence. Analyze the elements of style within the poem. All style elements help convey the speaker's attitude, and successful close analysis considers the effect that each style element has on the tone and meaning of the poem. So think about the fashionistas we have on the left here, right? Each piece of their outfit, the way that they constructed it, the cut, the way it lays on their body, the accessories, changes how you view the total person, right? Clothes can change whether we respect somebody on first glance or if we kind of laugh them off, right? No different with a poem. We need to look at each stylistic choice within the poem in order to get the overall image. This is not something that happens quickly. I would say poems can take hours to get through. Not that they take a long time to read, but truly dissecting their meaning and analyzing all the stylistic elements you can identify takes time. And so we need to be really digging deeper in every aspect of this. If you find one meaning, don't just stop there. Keep delving into it, because the more you dig into a poem, the more you'll find. All right, language. Language that is not literal is called figurative. We've studied figurative languages before. Common figurative language includes similes, metaphors, extended metaphors, and personification. The difference between a metaphor and an extended metaphor is one that spans over several lines of the work. So it's stretched throughout the piece, for example, or at least through a stanza. Is where a metaphor will be like a one and done kind of thing. And there are other terms, other figurative language that you can use to identify, but those are the common ones. Also, imagery, language that appeals to any of the five senses. I don't know why I keep saying that. When you read poetry, it's important to think about how impressions of sensory experiences are created. So you might feel some sort of sensory feeling about what's happening, right? Like, for example, you can read a description of food that makes you salivate, your mouth starts to water. But how? How does reading create that emotion? How many of you have read a book or read something that has made you feel sad or cry? You have to think, okay, this has made me sad. How did they do this? It's just a book, right? Patterns of images, often repeated throughout a poem, can help create these sensory experiences. So the use of imagery is actually a really easy way to make connections with people. Now, talking about structure, there are some terms that go along with this. The first is syntax. Syntax is the arrangement of words into phrases, clauses, and sentences. Is another element of style that applies to both prose and poetry. So think about the specific structure, grammatical structure of sentences. Inversion is a reversal of position, order, form, or relationship, such as a change in normal word order. Think of Yoda. Baby Yoda, I used this example before. He inverts his sentences. That's the way of speaking. Now, in poems, sentences can be inverted in order to emphasize a specific meaning or to emphasize a specific part of that sentence. We also have an enjambment. An enjambment is when one line ends without a pause and must continue into the next line to complete its meaning. So these two lines are meant to go together. So now you will not swell the root of lads that wore their honors out. So the comma that sort of gives a break to this thought does not come till the end of the second sentence. So this is an enjambment because the first line, not sentence, sorry. The first line ends without anything, runs right into the second line, and then we have some sort of punctuation. So again, punctuation is really important, and when we dissect our first poem, that's actually one of the first things we're going to do is mark the punctuation. Next we have caesura. It's a pause within a line of poetry, sometimes punctuated, sometimes not. I think more often than not it's punctuated. Smart lad, or slip betimes away. Note this comma indicates a pause mid-sentence. A caesura is any sort of pause within a sentence. It can be with a comma, it can be with a dash, it can be the sentence ended in the middle of the sentence, whatever, right? Now we're going to look at meter. Now, there are all different types of meter, but basically what you need to know is that lines are structured in some sort of regular pattern of rhythm, which is called a meter. Literally, meter counts the measure of a line, referring to the pattern of stressed or unstressed syllables, combinations of which we call feet. The most common in the English language is iambic pentameter, which means there's 5 beats per line, I guess you could say, with one unstressed and one stressed together. We indicate these by marking a U for unstressed and a dash for stressed. And it's supposed to emulate like the way you naturally read. For example, I want to say all, but I put an asterisk because I'm not completely sure about that. Shakespeare's plays are written in iambic pentameter because we naturally speak in those like unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed combination, and so it was easier for people to memorize the lines. But let's look at this. Then look the there as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, and having perhaps the better claim. So you can see there's combinations of where I clapped are the stresses, right? But if I naturally read that, and having perhaps the better claim, and having perhaps the better claim. Those are naturally places where we stress those words. So when you're trying to identify meter, it can be quite difficult actually. You have to read through the poem and try to hear yourself, like, where am I stressing? I'm stressing different parts of the word. The foot ends where the stressed syllable is. So like, look, unstressed, stressed, foot ends. Unstressed, stressed, foot ends. Now we have 2 unstressed and a stressed. The foot ends with the stressed. This is a very odd meter. When we start to read poetry, I will show you how to dissect the meter. And I have a resource that shows all the different types of meter, because there's more than just iambic pentameter. There's a lot, although iambic pentameter is the most common. I'll show it to you, that I don't expect you to memorize it. But meter is something that you can look at, because let's say something is written in a combination of, there are 5 feet per line, and each foot is 1 unstressed and 1 stressed. If we get to line 4 and the meter is a little bit different, it's missing a stressed syllable, it's missing, a foot, whatever, then we need to pay more attention to that line. So meter is important in that sense, because there's a break in the normal pattern, and anytime there's a structure or a pattern and that's broken, we need to give attention to it. So that concludes this part of the notes. Stay tuned for part 3.